Hey, welcome again. So now in this video we'll talk about how we can create this dynamic UI. You can see right here, if I stand somewhere, the UI gets closer. Like now I can shoot, I can find my target easier. But if the character starts running, the UI starts spreading, which is kind of great. So that is dynamic, which means like when you stop somewhere, it collapses together, and when you run, it spreads around, which is great because when you're running around, you cannot find your targets correctly. But if you stand somewhere, if you stop, you can find your target easier, which is kind of great. So in this video, I'll show you how we can create this UI using Unreal Engine and C++. And also, in upcoming videos, we'll also talk about how we can spread the UI while you're shooting. But for now, it's not working. It only works with running. So let's stop the game, and I'll come back right in here. And now you can see this is our world. The first thing I did was to create a new C++ class for HUD. So how we can do that? It's very simple. You can come here to tools and create a new C++ class, and you can come down here. You can find HUD in here. So you can create a HUD class, give it a name like that, and there you go. Now you have HUD class. And then you can come to Visual Studio. In Visual Studio, we have this HUD.h file and also HUD.cpp file, which is kind of great. And so we give it a name like UD and the domain HUD, like that. And this has nothing by default, but you need to add all these things. Like the first thing is this void, this function, which returns nothing, that we tell them to draw crosshairs. And up here we have this virtual function which overrides, and that says draw HUD, like that's from Unreal Engine. We just override it in here. And in here we have this crosshair spread max. In here you can just change the crosshair spread, like how much you want to spread them. You can edit that from blueprints as well. And down here we have this 14 line which says set HUD package. So what is HUD package? In here we created this struct. You can see this is use struct, and we tell him blueprint type. And down here we have some variables for this. This is uTexture2D. Like this is just texture, like image and things. And that's a pointer. We tell it this is crosshair center. Like when you play the game, that's the center. This is the left, this is the right, this is the top, this is the bottom, and this is crosshair spread. So what does all this means? Like for this kind of UI, you cannot use a single image. Mostly when you're creating this UI, like for weapon aiming, you use single image. But for this type, you cannot use single UI. You need some kind of like this. I'll show you in a moment. If I come in here in our assets, in here I have these textures, and if I come here to the crosshairs, you can see this is like one side only. This is the bottom side, and this is like the center, which is just a dot in there, and this is the right, left, I mean, and we have right, and like everyone is separated. So first of all, in our HUD class, if I come here, in HUD class we have all these 5, like we have the center, left, right, top, and bottom, and we have this crosshair spread, like this is a float value for that. But first, we don't do anything in these functions. We come here to the character class. So we need to select this from somewhere. Basically it should be in weapon class that you select these crosshairs, because different weapons has different crosshairs. But in our case, till now we don't have any weapon. In upcoming videos we'll create weapons, so we don't have weapons. That's why I want to do it in base character class. So in base character.h file, I came here in weapon section. I told him we need this T object PTR of this uTexture2D, and we can call it like a crosshair center, left, right. Like we don't want to select that from HUD, we want to select this from character class. So we have all of this for character class, and we need a variable of this EUD HUD class, which is our own class, and we need these 2 float variables, which is for velocity factor and in air. When character is in air, like jumps and things, we have this factor for that as well. And then I can come here to the cpp file. We create this new function which is set HUD crosshair. This needs this delta time. It means like it should be called in delta time, because every single frame we want to check if the character needs to spread the UI or not. And then we can come in here. We need the controller. So this is how you can get the controller. And if the controller is not valid, we want to return early. If it is valid, then we want to get the HUD. We need to get the HUD from player controller. Like player controller can get you the HUD only if you select that in game mode. We'll talk about that just in a moment. And if the HUD is valid, then we want to create this new if HUD package, which is in .h file, and we need to include this header file. We already included that one, and we call it HUD package. And in the HUD package, we need to create all these, set all these variables like crosshair center, left, right, and bottom and top. And then we do a little bit of this work. We'll talk about that just in a moment. And then from this HUD, from this class, we call this set HUD package function, and we pass this package, which we set all these new pointers into that. And if I come in here, inside this function, which is this one, we set this HUD package. And this HUD package is just of type this struct, like we set all these variables and pointers in there, so we don't need to worry about that anymore. And down here, we want to set up this speed and things as well. Like we need to get the character speed and set up the HUD according to that. So we have this effector to D 2 times. This is for walk speed range. This is for velocity multiplier range. And down here, we have this velocity that we can get from the get velocity of this character. And down here we have this, we want to set the z velocity to 0, because for in air, like z velocity is up and down. For that, we already have one factor, so we don't need about this one. And down here we tell him this crosshairs velocity factor, we want to set that from here. So we need to clump that like in a value, which we can get this from if math. You should know about clump. If you don't know about these topics, you can follow my courses, links would be down there. And there, this needs some values. If I press F12, in here you can see the first value of this one is input range, and there's output range, and there is the value. So we pass the walk speed ranges as first one, and velocity multiplier range as the output range, and the velocity we get from this velocity dot size, in which we set the z value to 0. So it's only the velocity of x and y, like running around. And then we tell him if the character is falling, then we want to set this crosshairs in air factor as well. Like if he's falling from ups, or if he's jumping or something like that, then we want to set this crosshairs factor for. If it's not, we don't want it. But for now, we don't have jump function, and we're not jumping, so this will not work. In upcoming videos, when we add jumping and things, this will also work. And we tell him if it's not, then we want to set the crosshairs in air factor back to 0, which is great. So after setting this, like in this case, we only set this velocity factor from here, this get mapped range value clumped, in which we pass these two variables, and these two variables we have right in here. So after setting those things, we set this HUD package, that crosshair spread, which is a float variable. If I come here, you can see crosshair spread, this float variable. We set that one to this crosshairs velocity factor plus we add that crosshairs in air factor. So if he is running and he is in the air, that means we have two things at the same time. That time the UI should spread more. That's why we add them. But in this case, it will not work, because this would be 0 all the time, because we're not jumping. So we'll only have this crosshairs velocity factor. If you want to have more cases like shooting and things, all we need is to add that value in here. That's all we need to do in here. Like in upcoming videos, I'll show you how we can do that. So after doing all these things, we set the HUD package, and the rest of the work we do in the HUD.cpp file. And in here, first we have this draw HUD function, which returns nothing, and which is a virtual function from Unreal Engine. That's why we call it super function as well. And down here we get this viewport size from this JEngine viewport size, which has this function game viewport gate viewport size, like that. And down here we set this vector variable, and that's the viewport center. We want to get the viewport center from this viewport size and divide that by 2, like x and y, you divide that by 2, and you have the center of your viewport. Now down here we have this spread scaled, so we just multiply this crosshair spread like the max with this crosshair spread. So we should not cross the max value we have in here. That's why. And down here we just set them one by one from this HUD package crosshair center. We just check them if they're available or not. And then from this spread, the center, we don't want to change them. Like they should be the same all the time. That's why 0 0. And then we tell them draw crosshair default. This is a function we created. Like you can see right here, this needs 3 parameters: this texture, viewport center, and spread. We are going to talk about that just in a moment. So we check all of these one by one, and we add this spread value to them. Like center is 0 0. We never spread the center, and this left is on the -1 and X, and this right is just 1 on X only, like that's the positive value. And for top, we add this spread scaled value, which we negate that, and that's added on Y. Same thing for bottom, we add this spread scaled value to bottom, and that's the positive this time. And down here we have this draw crosshairs, which has these 3 parameters: u texture to D, which is a pointer; effector to D, which says the viewport center; and the spread value. And here we need these 2 things: texture weight and texture height, which we can get from this texture. We can get the X and Y like that, like the texture has its own functions, like this u texture to D pointer. And then here we have this const effector to D, which says texture draw point, like we draw this texture on the UI. And we tell him the first one, this is effector, so this needs 2 values. The first one is viewport center and X. We want to subtract this texture width divided by 2. So we divide this texture width by 2, and we add the spread, as this is the X value, we want to spread that on X. So if it is right and left, this value would be changed and this variable. And if it's on Y, so simple, like up and down, we tell them viewport center and Y. We subtract the texture height first, like divided by 2, and then we add this spread on Y, like this spread value, you know, where does it come from. And the last thing we do is this function, which is draw texture, which is on HUD, like we have not created this one. And draw texture needs the texture, we pass the texture, this needs the value of X and the value of Y and the weight and the height. You can see these things from the name, and the color we add. These are the default values, we just pass like the default values, and you can give the like different colors. Like in upcoming videos, we'll talk about how you can change the color of this texture to red while you're on target, and back to white while you're not on target, which is kind of great. So this is how you can create this amazing effect, like just running around. So the other thing you need to do is to create the game mode, like give me game mode base. For now it's only in blueprints, and in here we selected this HUD class, like the class we have created, like that's our own class. We created the blueprint class of our class, which is based on our own C++ class. So that's the one we select in here, and we select our pawn class as well, and then we select our game mode in world settings. So that's how we use our game mode. So if you don't do this, like I mean you don't create this blueprint of this HUD and game mode, and you don't select these things, what will go wrong? If you come back to Visual Studio and in here in .cpp file, down here from this controller, you can see from player controller we get HUD. So that's why that way you will not get the HUD. We have like this UD HUD, which is our own HUD, and if you don't access that one, that's so you will not be able to set these values and you will not have the result you want. That's why you need to create game mode. You need to select these 2 in-game mode in here and add a player start in here. If you don't know how to add a player start, you can just simply come in here and search for player start, add a player start, and you can play the game. And now you have a dynamic HUD in your game. Now you run around, you can spread and collapse the HUD, which is dynamic and which is great. So that's all about this video. I hope you've learned some important thing from this video, because this HUD is really important. So it should be dynamic. And yeah, I'll see you in other videos where we'll talk about some other functionality as well.